Catherine clutched the script to her chest, keeping it covered with her cream cardigan as she rushed through the rain to her house. The sun wasn't down yet, but the dark clouds above made it so it seemed dark. She tried to avoid puddles as she ran down the uneven sidewalk and avoided the street when cars passed by, hitting water that piled up in the gutter and spraying it everywhere. By the time she made it home, the rain had soaked through her cardigan and got several of the script pages wet. She sighed and set the papers down on the kitchen table before peeling off the cardigan, hanging it on the back of one of the wooden, kitchen chairs. She kicked off her boots and peeled off her socks, letting them drop to the floor with a loud slop. Her auburn hair stuck to her skin as she tried to pull it back behind her shoulders before grabbing the wet papers and spreading them out on the wooden floor. A circle made the most sense to her, then she could just sit in the middle to read them while they dried and not have to get up. So she laid them out in order in a circle before going to her bedroom. Water had a way of making everything stick, making it hard to get undressed, especially when wearing leggings. Catherine peeled off her clothes and at first was tempted to leave them in a bunched-up pile on the bathroom floor. She stared at the pile and scrunched up her face, knowing full well she'd be mad at herself later if she didn't at least lay them out flat. She hung up the wet clothes and got in the shower shivering. It took a while for the hot water to soak in and take away the chill, though it didn't seem to fully leave. Closing her eyes, she tried to rid herself of all the annoyances from the day. Having to run home in the rain was really the last annoying thing that happened. Acting was always something she wanted to do, but she'd always been incredibly shy. She longed to be like the people who had confidence enough to go on stage, and she'd finally worked up the nerve to audition for something last semester. She only had a small part in the play, but it was enough to encourage her to try again, for something bigger. Auditions were tomorrow, and while others had gotten together to practice, her awkwardness had her being left out of the group running lines and going for pizza afterwards. In fact, Ashley made a point to say Catherine was not invited. As if that wasn't bad enough, her year-and-a-half crush on Jason Macker was still going strong, and now Ashley had her eyes set on him. Catherine felt invisible most the time, but especially so when Ashley walked in the room. Today, Jason hadn't even graced Catherine with a small smile that she often got, although they rarely spoke to each other. There was also the minor fact that Ashley was going for the same part Catherine was. Catherine breathed in and out deeply, trying to let the heat from the shower calm her nerves before she went back to practicing her lines. She wanted to do well tomorrow. She'd been working very hard and wasn't about to give up just because of a bad day. After the shower, she worked in leave-in conditioner to keep her curly hair as tamed as possible before putting on dry leggings and an oversized cable knit sweater along with wool socks. That chill wasn't completely gone yet, so she decided to stay bundled and make a hot drink. The old wooden floor creaked under protest as she made her way past her circle of papers to the kitchen. It was an open floor plan, except for her closed-off room. She started the tea kettle and grabbed her favorite mug, an oversized mug with the Oscar Wilde quote, "With freedom, flowers, books, and the moon, who could not be perfectly happy?" She opened the cupboard and stared at the contents, fully aware she should probably stick with an herbal tea of some sort to help her relax so she could sleep before auditions. But there was also hot chocolate. Hot chocolate had too much sugar and would probably keep her awake. But, chocolate. She thought. She grabbed a pack of hot chocolate. Self-control could wait a day. She was tired. She made the hot chocolate and piled on tiny marshmallows before sitting in the middle of her script circle. Leaning forward, she started on the first page and sipped her cocoa. She hardly made it down the first page when thunder cracked so loud, the house shook. Then the power went out. Funny, it seemed perfectly quiet in the house before, but as everything seemed to shut off in waves, all the background humming she'd filtered out was gone, and now it was actually quiet, almost unsettling so. She sighed and sat there a moment, wondering if the universe was telling her to give up on this ridiculous idea of becoming a stage actress. After only a few moments dwelling on the existential crisis, she made herself get up and carefully maneuver towards a kitchen drawer she kept matches and flashlights in. She only half stubbed her toe on the way over and whimpered, hopping on one foot and almost falling over before sucking it up and putting her foot down again. She bit her lip and ignored the pain as she made it to the drawer and fumbled around until she found the flashlight. Turning it on, she found the matches and walked over to the bag she brought home from choir. The bag contained all sizes of white, scentless candles that they used during a harvest festival at church just a couple weeks ago. No one else wanted them, but she figured if for nothing else she could use them for crafts, so she brought them home. She lined the candles around the outside of the script circle, but that didn't light it up enough, so she added ones along the inside as well and lit them until she could finally read the scripts again. Once she was all done, she sat down in the circle, but then her tummy rumbled. "I just sat down," she grumbled. She frowned and set her hand on her stomach, glancing to the kitchen and trying to do a mental recap of what all she had. It wasn't much. Today was Friday and it was payday, but she'd been busy all day and didn't make it to get groceries before the rain. Leaving now when she was all warm and bundled sounded like a terrible idea. Saturdays were always busy at the stores, but she'd have to at least brave one tomorrow so she could eat normally. She checked the date on her phone. The 13th. Tomorrow was the 14th. The day she'd been preparing for over the last several weeks. It was strange, it was finally time. "You'd think my stomach would be too full of nerves to be hungry," she muttered, setting her cocoa down. Kat sighed and got up, carefully stepping over her papers and candles and shuffling over to the kitchen cupboard. She opened it up and it was mostly tea and baking stuff, nothing easy to fix. Except there was a microwavable brownie. The power was out, but the brownie just called for hot water and the kettle was still hot. She grabbed it and poured the powder into a mug before pouring in the hot water from the kettle. She grabbed a spoon and returned to her circle, stirring it until it thickened while she read over the script. It was a silly play, and if she got the part, she couldn't let anyone from church know about it. The story was a dark comedy about a woman who discovered her husband was cheating on her and summoned a demon to torture and kill him. She ends up summoning the wrong kind of demon and hilarity ensues. Kat was going after the part of the betrayed wife, Constance, who follows the demon around and tries to discover how to send it back to hell. Kat skimmed through lines that weren't hers and spoke as loud and clear as she could for her own lines. It got to the part where the demon would be summoned. Suddenly it wasn't as dark. She looked to the window and saw somehow the full moon found a break in the clouds and was shining through her giant living room window right on her. She smiled and took a bite of her brownie, feeling like it was a sign to keep going since she could see better now. She returned her attention to the script. The papers finally seemed dry, thanks to the added heat of the candles. She picked it up and it felt more brittle than before, she'd have to be careful with it. She read the Latin words used to summon Constance's demon in her head before speaking them. She'd been carefully practicing the pronunciation so she would impress the director. She noticed Ashley's pronunciation wasn't quite right, so she hoped getting this right would mean something. "Hoc est acta facicuau," she said, pulling her finger back. Nervously running her fingers down the edges of the paper caused a deep paper cut. Kat sighed as the blood pooled and dripped down onto one of the candles. She stuck her finger in her mouth and rolled her eyes at herself. She waited until the bleeding seemed to mostly stop before she tried again. "Hoc est acta fasciculum ineptias ego typed in interpretari do vobis, sed ut agnoscimus," she said loudly. Actually, she was supposed to yell this part. She considered moving on, but it seemed pertinent to get it right, so she said it again. At the end of the last one she shuddered as thunder crackled again. She shook her head at allowing the sound to scare her. "It's just thunder." She repeated the phrase a third and final time. "Hoc est acta fasciculum ineptias ego typed in interpretari do vobis, sed ut agnoscimus." She yelled. The thunder this time was much louder, so much louder it shook the house to the point that her shelves shook and some of the contents fell over. Not only that, a gust came through and sent her papers flying, blowing out the candles and leaving her in darkness as the moon was covered once again. Kat sat there shaking and glancing around the darkness. "That was weird," she muttered, looking around to try to see if she could find the open window that sent everything flying. The chill she'd almost gotten rid of returned with a vengeance when she saw a figure standing by the window, inside her house. She clambered away, knocking into the blown-out candles and spilling wax on the floor. "Who are you?" she demanded, fumbling around for the flashlight. The figure moved away from the window and she blinked. It seemed inhuman, the way it moved. It must be the shadows playing tricks on her. She looked around but it was dark. Creaking from her left had her snapping her head to the sound. "Stay away," she said, finding the flashlight and shining it towards the person as she stood shakily. It moved again, almost seeming to leave a dark mist behind it. "Who are you?" she repeated, backing away and shining her flashlight around, trying to find the stranger. "I am that which you called for, the spirit you summoned with your own blood," he said, seeming to be in several places at once, leaving Kat jolting the flashlight around with his quick movement. "Deathbringer, shadow of violence, blood fiend, slayer and torturer of souls. The name you call me by does not matter. The only question I have for you is," he paused in front of her, finally in the light. He had incredibly pale skin, teeth that seemed just a little too sharp, eyes red as blood, hair blacker than night. His clothes seemed to be from another time, a doublet colored black and red. Kat froze, swallowing hard as he leaned in close to her before speaking. "Who is it you want killed?" It was silent as she stared at him with wide eyes and he waited for an answer. She reached behind her and grabbed hold of the first thing she could find. Then she hit him on the head with a polka-dot umbrella. Kat slammed the umbrella down hard but the most it seemed to do was shock the intruder. He didn't even move, just narrowed his unnatural eyes at her. "Get out!" she screamed, shoving him back and smacking him with the umbrella again. "Out! This is a seriously messed up Friday the 13th prank. What is wrong with you? Who is your mother?" she yelled, smacking him with the umbrella repeatedly. "You have 5 seconds to get out of my house before I call the police." The demon moved back more out of confusion than anything else. He regarded her with a raised eyebrow before finally getting sick of the hits and snatching the umbrella. The candles suddenly were relit and Kat could see him better now. He was even more terrifying with more light. Kat hesitated only a moment before lunging, trying to get the umbrella back. The demon scowled and the umbrella crumbled to ashes in his hands. "What are you doing?" he asked, catching her wrist when she swung it around to hit him. "What am I doing?" Kat squeaked. "What are you doing? How did you break my umbrella? Get out of my house." She tried to hit him with her other hand but he caught that as well, pining them both behind her back, the action pressing their bodies together. "That's enough," he snapped, fixing her with a glare that left her motionless. "I'm here because you summoned me, human. Now, tell me who it is you want killed so I can leave this pathetic realm." "Kill?" she breathed. "I don't want you to kill anyone. This prank is too far. Get out of my house." He was about to growl but her knee came up unexpectedly, smashing between his legs and leaving him wheezing and cupping himself as he sank to the ground. She ran to her room, locking the door and pulling her phone out of her pocket. She dialed 911 and leaned back against the door, listening for the intruder's movement. 911, what's your emergency?" "Someone broke into my house," Kat answered shakily. A man broke into my house and he won't leave and he's talking about killing people." It was eerily quiet on the other side of the door. Kat tried to convince herself this house was old and creaky and if he was headed her way, she would definitely hear it. She gave the authorities her address and was about to answer another question when the stranger was suddenly in front of her, eyes glowing red. He snatched the phone and crushed it in his hand before grabbing her and spinning her around, pinning her wrists behind her back and pressing her up against the door. "That was not very nice," he seethed, pressing her into the door with his body. "What is your problem, human? You're the one that summoned me here. You think I wanted to be torn away from my hounds for this shit? Stop playing games and tell me who you want dead. How did you get in here? Cat asked, squirming under his hold. I'm a demon. A locked door doesn't mean shit to me. What the fuck is your deal? He growled. I haven't been summoned in decades and this is the shit I get. He muttered, barely audible enough for Cat to catch. Please leave me alone, Cat said, tears filling her eyes. I don't know who you are but please don't hurt me. Take whatever you want, just let me go, she said, struggling against his hold. He was ready this time and when she braced on the door and tried to push back and slam into him, he let her go and moved aside, letting her fall back towards the floor. She expected pain upon landing but he caught her before she hit the ground then pushed her against it, straddling over her, pinning her legs down with his and her hands above her head. I'm not here to hurt you, he said, frowning in confusion. You called me here. Not the other way around. Why are you crying? Because you're scaring me, Cat whimpered. Let me go. So you can smack me with whatever other stupid human contraption you have and knee me in the balls. I don't think so, he growled. Just tell me who you want dead and we will never have to see each other again. I don't want anyone dead. Are you crazy? Get off me. Cat said, squirming around. The demon sighed heavily and breathed in and out. Why the fuck would you summon me if you don't want anyone dead? I didn't summon anything. Cat screamed. Each wiggle just made him hold her tighter until she couldn't move at all. Then she heard sirens. She sighed in relief, trying to get a hold of herself. You're in for it now, she warned. Because I'm definitely pressing charges, you psychopath. You called the authorities on me and you think they're actually going to do something? He asked, seeming amused. They won't even be able to see me. You're a person, of course they'll be able to see you, Cat snapped, still desperately trying to get him off her. I'm not a human, he said, narrowing his eyes. I'm a demon. A demon you summoned. My only way back is to accomplish what I've been summoned for, so for the love of all that is unholy just give me a fucking name, he growled. You're not a demon, you're just insane. And I don't want anyone dead, let me go. Cat screeched. There was knocking on the front door and Cat screamed loudly. The demon moved off her, covering his ears and cursing. You foolish human, he spat. Go ahead. Go answer the door and show me to them, he said, opening her bedroom door and waving her through. She hesitated, wondering what trap he had planned. He waved her through again and she darted past him, opening up the front door and letting in the officers. She turned to the stranger triumphantly, but her victory diminished quickly when they ran right past him. He crossed his arms and raised an eyebrow, smiling smugly. He's... She started, frowning. He must have left, an officer said, standing right next to the demon. Where did you last see him? The officer asked. Where indeed? The demon asked, tilting his head to the side. He's right. She frowned, pointing next to the officer. The officer followed her finger, looking right where the demon was, then past him. The bedroom? The officer asked, heading that way and walking right through the demon. Cat opened her mouth but no words came out, just a slight squeak. The demon walked towards her and she backed up into the wall, making the other officers look over in confusion. They couldn't see him. I told you, the demon said, leaning against the wall. They can't see me unless I let them. I'd make up something about me disappearing in the backyard unless you want them to believe you're insane, he said, nodding to the officers who were whispering to each other and casting her doubtful glances. Cat shook her head and closed her eyes, forcing herself to breathe evenly before opening them. She looked over and the demon was still there, looking at her expectantly. Well? He said, raising an eyebrow. Isn't it against some law for you to make a fake phone call to the authorities? Don't make me break you out of jail, you've pissed me off enough for one night. Kat was at a loss of words, but more than once the officers looked over and didn't see the stranger. She thought back to when he appeared, the candles, the words. Her eyes widened and she sunk to the floor, unable to catch her breath. "Human," the demon said, crouching next to her. "What's wrong now? Just send them away so we can move on." "You. It. Not. Possible," she breathed, too quietly for the officers to hear. "Are you all right, miss?" one asked, walking over to her. "For fuck's sake," the demon muttered. "Get a hold of yourself. Breathe." "Everything's, fine," he said, patting her back. "Maybe we should call someone," an officer said. Kat snapped out of it at that. Call someone? They probably thought she was insane. She evened out her breathing and shook her head, looking up at the officers. "No," she said, trying to keep her tone even. "I'm just scared. The last I saw him was by the back door. I kicked him and ran into my bedroom," she said, nodding to the bedroom. "The sirens might have scared him off," one said, rubbing his chin. "Was it someone you knew?" "No," Kat answered, setting her hands on her knees and making herself stand. "Did he hurt you?" the officer pressed. "No. Just scared me," Kat said, setting her hand on her chest. "It is Friday the 13th, the other officer pointed out. All the crazies are out. Why don't we make sure the house is secure and leave an officer outside to watch your house tonight?" "Okay," Kat answered, wrapping her arms around herself. Kat sat at the kitchen table while the cops searched the rest of the house. The demon sat at a table next to her with his feet propped on the table. Normally she would yell at him for having his feet on the table, but she didn't want to seem crazy to the officers, yelling at nothing. Part of her was starting to wonder if she was crazy. The power came back on while they looked and Kat could see the mess left behind. The cocoa spilled over, the candles that were knocked over. The hot wax that spilled over was now hardened onto her floor. The officers finally left, and once the door shut, the demon took his feet off the table and sat up straighter, smoothing out his black and red doublet. "All right, now that the unnecessary drama is out of the way," he said, sending her a glare. "Give me a name." "I don't want anyone dead," Kat answered, narrowing her eyes. "Then why the fuck did you summon me?" he growled. "It was an accident. I was preparing for a play," she said in exasperation, walking over and picking up the papers that scattered all over the kitchen. She found the one with the words and held it up, waving it around. "See? I wasn't trying to summon you. I was just rehearsing." The demon snatched the paper and read it over. He reached the end and scoffed, rolling his eyes and crumpling the paper up into a ball before throwing it at the floor. "This is ridiculous. The words aren't enough. You would have to have fire and blood and the light of a full moon," he said, holding up 3 fingers. "Just how into the scene did you get? You also have to repeat the phrase 3 times and I only saw it once on there." Kat paused, remembering the incident. "The power was out so I had candles. And there was a break in the clouds and the moon came out. Fire and moonlight. And I gave myself a paper cut. Blood. And I said it 3 times to get the pronunciation right." "This is a cruel joke," the demon sneered. "There's no fucking way you accidentally performed a ritual and summoned me. Do you have any idea who I am?" "I really don't," Kat admitted, biting her lip and daring a look up at him. He somehow became scarier. Black surrounded his eyes and spread out like veins. He growled and horns appeared briefly before he vanished in a cloud of black smoke, leaving Kat alone and terrified. After staring blankly at the spot the demon vanished from, Kat finally found it within her to start cleaning up the mess. She did the best she could, scraping the wax off the floor, but it looked as though it was going to leave a stain. Eventually she made it to bed, but she was so on edge, every little sound set her off and she couldn't sleep until the sun was coming up. At that point she only had 2 hours to rest before the alarm went off, letting her know she had to get up and get ready for the audition. She'd already taken a shower last night but her body was so tense she decided to try again. She tied her curly hair back in a messy bun, the best she could manage since her hair would not be tamed. She got in the shower and let the heat hit her shoulders, hoping to ease some of the tension. Kat walked out of the shower and wrapped herself up in a towel before wiping the steam off the mirror. She glanced down at her makeup bag and wondered how easily she would be able to cover up how tired her eyes were today. She looked up in the mirror and saw the demon in the reflection. She screamed and spun around. "What are you doing?" she hissed, clutching the towel tightly. The demon's eyes briefly dropped up and down her body before returning to her eyes. He seemed much calmer than he'd been last night. "I want to go home," he said simply. "And you are apparently my only ticket there. So we need to work with each other," he said, gesturing between them. "Are you insane? I'm practically naked, get out of my bathroom," Kat said, pointing to the door. "I noticed," he said, raising an eyebrow. "If you didn't wear clothes like you had last night, you might not live alone. It actually seems to be not too bad under there," he said, his eyes darting down her body again. "Oh my God. Get out," she said, pushing him to the door. "Fine, but I do expect cooperation when you're done getting dressed," he said, letting her direct him out the door. "And please don't refer to that tyrant in my presence," he added bitterly. She slammed the door shut and rested her forehead against it, breathing in and out to try to remain calm. It was all insane and she didn't know what to do, but she did know she didn't want to miss out on this audition. She'd worked too hard for it and she wasn't going to let some paranormal being get in her way. "Oh, God, I am going crazy." There was no time for craziness. She quickly got dressed and put on makeup, letting her hair stay down but using that angle to get it to look as nice as it would. She put on a nice white shirt and black pants and did just a little makeup before coming out. The demon was lounging on her bed, holding a picture frame that she kept on the nightstand. He looked over when she came out and she pointedly ignored him, going into her closet for boots and a jacket. "Right," he said, sitting up. "A name. Go ahead." "I'm not giving you a name to kill someone," Kat snapped. "Don't be ridiculous." "Of course you are," the demon said, tossing the picture onto the bed. "Everyone hates someone. Just pick anyone. It could even be some terrible leader in this country or even another. A neighbor you hate. Some pervert you heard about on the news. Just pick someone so I can go home." "I'm not going to be an accomplice to murder," Kat hissed, slipping her boot on. "And you know what? I don't have time for this. I have an audition that I've been painstakingly preparing for and I'm not going to let you ruin it." "The audition for that stupid play that gave you the words to actually summon a demon?" he scoffed. "Aren't you worried you'll summon another?" "Now that I know what to avoid it shouldn't be a problem," Kat snapped, standing up and slipping her jacket on. "I have to go now. Leave me alone. This is important to me." Kat walked out of her room but the demon appeared in front of her, stopping her advancement. "That's all good and fine that this stupid play is important to you, but you know what's important to me? Getting home. My hounds are probably wandering around the underworld thinking I've abandoned them," he said, throwing his arms up in exasperation. "You have dogs?" Kat asked, tilting her head to the side. "Yes, human. I have dogs. Dogs that I feed and take care of that are now just wandering aimlessly about. Do you have any idea how dangerous it is in the underworld? Give me a name so I can go home," he growled. "I'm sorry about your dogs," Kat sighed. "But I can't do this right now. I need to focus." "Just sit tight and stop calling me human, it sounds like an insult the way you say it," she said, brushing past him and going out the front door. She only made it a few blocks before he appeared next to her, walking nonchalantly beside her with his hands stuffed in his pockets, as if it was completely natural he appeared out of air. "We've got off on the wrong foot," he said, giving her a side glance. "My name is Nex. What's yours?" "Your name is Next," Kat asked, looking over at him skeptically. "Nex," he corrected, narrowing his eyes. "What's yours?" "Catherine," she answered, wrapping her arms around herself. "Catherine," Nex laughed, throwing his head back. "Why are you laughing at my name?" Kat asked, sending him a dirty look. "Because that higher power you were calling to must have done this to fuck with me, that's why," Nex laughed, shaking his head. "Now what about this audition? Is there competition?" "What do you mean by that?" "About my name?" Kat asked, stepping onto the bus. "I mean your name, Catherine, it means pure. About as far from anything that I am." "You do seem rather pure," he said, wrinkling his nose in disgust. "You reek of virginity." Kat's eyes widened and her pale skin turned red too easily. She turned away from him, crossing her arms. "What's wrong? Did I offend you by stating the truth? How old are you anyway? Don't most humans lose their virginity while in forced school?" Nex taunted. "Shut up," Kat snapped. Several people looked over and frowned in confusion. It was then Kat remembered no one could see him. She sighed and pressed her fingers to her temples, holding onto a bar as the bus started moving. "If you're so embarrassed by it, why not do anything about it?" Nex asked. "Honestly, virginity only means something to those that want to sacrifice you for rituals or people who get some weird pleasure out of having a woman for the first time. It's actually safer for you to just get it over with." Kat wanted to reply but bit her tongue. People were going to think she was crazy. Nex grabbed her and turned her towards him. Reaching into her pocket he pulled out her headphones and placed an earbud in her ear, hiding the other end in her pocket. "There. Now they'll think you're on the phone," he said simply, crossing his arms and seeming to never lose balance even as the bus stopped abruptly and shifted everyone else. "I don't want to talk to you," Kat hissed, gripping the bar tighter. "You're rude and scary and—" She glanced around and lowered her voice, "Invisible," she whispered. "So just leave me alone and let me focus." She turned away from him and he sighed loudly but remained silent. Nex followed her off at her stop and into the theater where the auditions were being held. Kat checked in and waited in the back for her turn. Nex had disappeared when she was checking in and hadn't shown up again. She hoped he would just stay away until the audition was over. "Hey Kat," Jason greeted, leaning against the wall next to her with a grin. Hi, she stammered, tucking her hair behind her ears. "You nervous?" he asked, inclining his head to the stage. "A little," Kat admitted, shrugging. "You shouldn't be," he said, nudging her shoulder with his. "You're going to do awesome," he winked, pushing off the wall and heading to the stage when his name was called. "You look really cute today, by the way." Kat flushed at the compliment and Jason gave her one last smile before going out onto the stage. Kat sighed after him, unable to stop the smile. "Kat?" Nex asked, suddenly appearing right next to her and making her jump. "Don't do that," she hissed, smacking his arm. "You said your name is Catherine," Nex said, crossing his arms. "Kat is a nickname," Kat sighed. "Is it?" Nex said, tilting his head to the side. "No, it doesn't suit you. Cats are vicious and attack with claws. Kitten would be much more suitable for you," he said with a teasing smile. "A kitten bats at you and tries to get somewhere but in the end is just easy to pick up and push around, all talk and no real action. Kitten is much more you." "Ugh," Kat groaned. "Do not call me that. That's such a gross nickname," she said, shuddering. "And I'm not weak, if you were an actual person with normal strength I would have fended you off." "Sure you would have." "Sorry, kitten. I'm afraid it suits you just too well to not use," Nex said, even more amused. So, if you give me a name I'll help you seduce Mr. He glanced over at Jason, making a face. Preppy, clean-cut, blondie, douchey. Really? That's your type? He said, looking back at Kat skeptically. How dreadfully boring. Kat opened her mouth to speak but stopped when she saw Ashley approaching. She was in a tight dress that plunged down so far, she wouldn't need to bend over to give anyone a view of her cleavage, it was already all out there. Kat held in the groan and took a deep breath. Ah, Catherine, look at you like a little schoolgirl just so excited to be noticed by her crush. And trying so hard to audition for a role we both know you won't get, Ashley said with fake enthusiasm. It's adorable, really. It's adorable you think you can play with the big kids. Who's this bitch? Nex asked, glaring at Ashley. Kat ignored him the best she could and just stared at Ashley blankly. If you're so confident then why do you feel the need to come and try to frazzle me? Kat challenged. I don't need to, Ashley laughed, tossing back her blonde hair. It's just fun to get in your head. You make it so easy. Who dressed you this morning? The nuns? I'm just wondering how you manage to pull off looking so innocent when you pine after Jason every day and probably think about him when you're alone, touching yourself because God knows no one else wants to touch you. This is the one, Nex growled, balling his fists. Give me the go-ahead and I'll kill her right now. Go away, Ashley, Kat said, shaking her head. Practice your lines. I already practiced my lines, Ashley said, picking at her fingernails. I practiced them with Jason last night, she taunted, a glint in her eye. Well, practicing is a loose term. It did start some fun role-playing though, she said with a wink before walking away with much more swing in her hips than she needed. Good luck, sweetie. You'll need it. Kat sighed in annoyance and tugged at her clothes, chewing on her lip and watching as Ashley went through her audition. Seriously. Give me the order and she's dead, Nex repeated. No, Kat hissed. Why? She's a cunt. She's being rude to you. Just let me kill her, Nex pressed. No. Please. No. For fuck's sake, he growled. You're impossible. Catherine Milton. The director called. You're up. Kat walked quickly down the street with her arms wrapped around herself, telling herself not to cry. Nex was right behind her and she wanted nothing more than to turn around and punch him. She didn't get the part and the last thing she wanted was him pestering her. Kitten, Nex said, walking alongside her and catching her arm to make her stop. That audition was bullshit. Just let me kill Ashley, he said, gesturing back to the general direction of the theater. She's a cocksucking bitch, anyway. No one will miss her. Except the director and whoever else's cock she sucks to get what she wants. E.W. Oh my God. Kat said, covering her ears. What is wrong with you? She hissed, yanking out of his grip and continuing down the street. You know that's all it is, don't you? Nex said, catching up easily. She was practically flashing her tits at him and I could smell him on her. She didn't fuck that preppy boy you have eyes for, she fucked the director. Do you have to talk like that? Kat whined, wrinkling her nose. Jeez. Don't tell me you're offended by the word tits. You have some, how can that be offensive? He said, gesturing to her breasts. Seriously, Kat stopped and turned to him, poking his chest angrily. Shut up. I can't take it. You're so annoying and abrasive. Just go away and let me have a few minutes to be sad, is that really too much to ask? You want to be left alone, I want to go home, the very simple solution to this is to let me kill Ashley, Nex shrugged. I hate you, Kat hissed, turning and walking away. I don't care that you hate me, kitten. I care that you give me a fucking name already, he groaned. Kat ignored him and walked into a grocery store. She was surprised to not hear him speak again, but as she glanced around, she found he wasn't following her anymore. Sighing in relief, she grabbed a basket and started loading it up. It was moments like these she wished she could buy alcohol, but she had 2 more years. So, instead, she stared at the wine her mom used to get longingly before moving on and grabbing a frozen pizza. Normally she wouldn't buy that, but she was too sad to not have some carbs. But even carbs made her feel guilty, so she got a frozen pizza with cauliflower crust. The truth was, even if Ashley had slept with the director to get the part, Kat had messed up. She froze up and stuttered on her words. Every practice she'd done beforehand went smoothly, but having Ashley sitting on the side with a taunting smile messed with her more than she wanted to admit. So even if it was being judged fairly, she still wouldn't have made it. Kat actually made it home without seeing Nex again. She was starting to grow suspicious, so when she got home she carefully peered inside. It was silent. She moved through the house and looked around, but he wasn't anywhere to be found. Setting down the bag of groceries, she ran into her bedroom to find pajamas and change before he appeared again. She slipped on leggings and another sweater, breathing a sigh of relief when she didn't see Nex once she was done. Kat went to the kitchen and turned on the oven before putting the groceries away. She slid the pizza into the oven and then reached for the cabinet, grabbing her mug. Except a hand locked around her wrist, keeping her from pulling the mug out. Based on how incredibly uptight you are with everything else, I doubt you'll want to use a mug to drink your wine, Nex said. It wasn't until then she felt him pressed against her back, his arm coming over hers as it stayed locked around her wrist. She stopped breathing momentarily and focused on restarting her heart. Can't you just leave me alone for one night? She scowled. And I don't have any wine. I know, he sighed, squeezing her wrist until she let the mug go. But your pathetic longing stare at the wine showed me what kind you wish to have, he said, bringing his other arm around her other side, holding a bottle of wine in front of her and trapping her between his arms. What's wrong, kitten? Are you so young you can't buy alcohol and too good a girl to find a way around the law to buy it anyway? You weren't even in the store, she whined, pulling her hand away and turning to push him back so he wasn't so close. Except he didn't budge. I was in the store, he said, narrowing his eyes. I was just giving you your moment of peace. Which ended too soon, Kat huffed, pushing against him again. Back off, Nex. Why? Do I make you nervous, kitten? He teased, leaning in close. Kat swallowed hard, and it was then she noticed his eyes weren't blood red anymore. They were more like an amber. She frowned and looked down, seeing he was dressed like a normal person in jeans and a shirt instead of the fancy clothes. What happened to you? She asked. I took a physical form since this seems to be taking longer than I hoped, Nex said, rolling his eyes and reaching past her for a wine glass. His arms came around her as he reached behind her to open the wine bottle and pour the wine. You don't need to be this close to me, Kat said, trying to push him back again. No, he agreed. However, it annoys you, and I think I've earned a bit of annoying you since you refused to send me home even though it's your fault I'm here in the first place, he said, narrowing his eyes and stepping back, holding up the glass of wine. Can't you just find another way home? She sighed, snatching the glass and moving over to the couch. She plopped down and pulled her feet up, grabbing a blanket off the back of the couch and pulling it over herself. I tried, Nex said, crossing his arms and glaring down at her. All the sources I have say it has to be you since it's bonded with your blood. Well, what do you need me for? Just go kill some rando and leave me out of it, she grumbled, sipping on her wine. I can't, kitten, he sighed. It won't count unless you order it. Stop calling me kitten, Kat snapped. Start cooperating so I can go home, Nex countered. So what, I control you? Kat asked. I wouldn't put it that way, he said, narrowing his eyes. Kat stifled a laugh. I do, don't I? You can't hurt anyone unless I tell you to, can you? Nex clenched and unclenched his fists, his nostrils flaring. It isn't funny, Catherine. I'd proceed with caution if I were you. Why? You can't hurt me. That would mess you up, Cat shrugged, taking another sip of wine. Nex moved so impossibly fast Cat couldn't comprehend how the glass of wine was no longer in her hands or the blanket over her. Those were less concerning than the fact she was now laying on the couch and Nex was laying on top of her. Don't piss me off, kitten. There are other ways to hurt you and I am very creative, he said, his eyes darkening as his hand slid down and gripped her hips as he settled between her legs. You wouldn't, Cat breathed, her voice shaky. You can't. That has to count as hurting me. Not if you want it, Nex smirked. And believe me, kitten, as a demon I know all the ways to seduce someone. Even someone as uptight as you. Even a virgin. You think I haven't noticed how you respond to me? I could have you begging me for it in only a few minutes and I do wonder how you would feel afterwards, after giving your virginity to a demon, he said, skimming his nose along her neck. So watch it, he growled. As fast as he was on her, he was off, standing next to the TV with crossed arms, looking pissed off again. You're such a jerk, Cat breathed, sitting up and grabbing the blanket again. Call me what you want. I just want to go home, he said, tapping his fingers against his arm. Come on, I'll make it easy, we'll find out where they still do capital punishment and you can pick someone that's going to die anyway. Easy. No blood on your hands, he shrugged. But it would be blood on my hands, Cat argued. Me telling you to kill anyone would put blood on my hands. They're going to die anyway, Nex snapped. I don't believe in capital punishment, Cat shrugged, reaching for the remote. You don't. Nex started then growled and paced back and forth. Of all the fucking humans I get this little angel, he said in disgust. You know most the population of this despicable realm would have more than one name to give and you can't even come up with one. I don't like using violence as a way of solving things, Cat said, turning on the TV. Get used to it, Nex growled, balling his fists. Using violence as power is part of this world. Plenty of people use violence as power. And I'd be just as bad as the rest of them if I did this, Cat said, frowning. Change has to happen with yourself first, then the world. You're fucking unbelievable, he seethed. Humans are violent by nature. Where is your violence? I don't have any, Cat shrugged. Look, I work at a bookstore and we have a lot of older books. Tomorrow afternoon on my shift, I'll find some books and see if I can find a way to undo this and get you home to your puppies. They're not puppy dash, Nex started then growled, shaking his head. I've already been looking for ways, this is the only way. You have to let me kill someone. No, Cat said, sipping her wine. I refuse to go to that extreme. There's always a loophole. We just have to find it. Nex's eyes bugged as he stood there fuming. He unplugged the TV before storming out the door, slamming it shut behind him. Cat only jumped slightly as the door slammed. He scared her, but the fact he couldn't actually hurt her or anyone else put her mind to ease enough she could relax with her wine. Cat woke up to her alarm going off and groaned in protest, burying her face in the pillow. She reached out blindly to shut it off but heard a smash and frowned, picking her head up. Her alarm was completely smashed, wiring sticking out and all. A hand slowly moved away from it. Not her hand. Her eyes widened and she squeaked, jumping back and falling out of bed, landing on her butt and dragging the blankets with her. Nex groaned and reached out to find a blanket but they were all on the floor with Cat. He lifted his head enough to glare at her over the edge of the bed. What the hell, kitten? Don't be a blanket hog. Cat blinked slowly before finally jumping up, clutching the blankets around her. She'd changed to a skimpy tank top and shorts before bed because the wine made her too hot to sleep in the layers she'd been wearing. Not only that but Nex was also barely dressed, only wearing boxers. He was a lot more sculpted than she noticed before, but now was not the time to notice too much. "What are you doing in my bed?" she demanded. "Until you send me home, this is our bed," Nex corrected, propping himself up on his elbow. "I don't have anywhere else to sleep. So, you better start coming up with a name or you'll be sleeping with me every night. I'll just warn you right now, I sometimes get affectionate in my sleep," he said, smirking and nodding to the blankets. "Drop the blankets, kitten, it's not as if you're naked and I already got to see you when I snuck in. You're horrible." Kat groaned, keeping the blankets around her as she stomped away from the bed to her closet. "Not sure why that would be a surprise, I am a demon after all. Why are you getting up so early anyway? Don't you humans usually sleep in on the weekends?" Nex asked, tucking his hands behind his head and lounging back on the bed. "None of your business," Kat snapped, grabbing a dress from the closet before going over to her dresser, carefully pulling out underwear so he wouldn't see. "Don't bother hiding the underwear, kitten," Nex said. "I already went through it and there's nothing impressive in there. You should seriously consider getting some lingerie. You have a nice body if you just stop hiding it." "You're disgusting," Kat hissed. "Don't go through my things." "I had to," Nex shrugged, sitting up. "I had to find space for me to move in my own clothes since I don't know how long I'll be stuck here thanks to you." He was trying to get a rise out of her, frustrate her enough to give in. She recognized it and refused to give him the benefit, so she just went into the bathroom. As she started taking off her clothes, she considered he might come in while she was showering, just to mess with her. She bit her lip and decided she could skip a shower, so just got dressed quickly and put on light makeup. There was nothing to do about the mess that was her hair, so she put it back in the best bun she could manage. She came out and he was going through her closet. She sighed and ignored him, trying not to touch him as she grabbed flats to wear with her dress, finding he'd already stashed the closet with some clothes. "This wardrobe looks like it belongs to a 40-year-old woman with too many cats whose husband is a minister, if she even has a husband, because she dresses like this," Nex said, shaking his head in disapproval. "How do you ever plan to get Blondie's attention wearing clothes like this?" Kat ignored him and slipped her shoes on, grabbed a jacket and headed out of the bedroom. She went to the kitchen and started the kettle, going into the fridge for yogurt and frowning at the contents. There was a case of beer, a bottle of whiskey, a bottle of vodka, and sodas. She closed the fridge and opened the freezer, finding stacks of frozen pizzas, egg rolls, taquitos and other junk food. It was then she noticed on the counter there were boxes of Pop-Tarts, bags of candy and chips. "Nex," she scowled, slamming the fridge shut. Somehow he was right there on the other side of the fridge. "You called, Rumi?" Nex said, smirking and leaning against the fridge. "What is all this?" she said, gesturing to the counter. "Food, kitten. You hardly had any in the house," Nex scoffed, grabbing a Pop-Tart from the box. "Everything you have is so healthy. Don't you ever enjoy life?" "I enjoy life," Kat defended, opening the fridge again and moving his garbage aside to get to her yogurt. "There's nothing wrong with being healthy." "There is if you never let yourself have fun," Nex countered, taking a bite of the Pop-Tart before offering her some. "Come on, it tastes much better than the living bacteria you're about to consume." "Go away," Kat said, grabbing a spoon and opening her yogurt, pointedly turning away from him to eat. He materialized in front of her and snatched the spoon before she brought it to her mouth, placing it in his mouth and dragging it down with a frown. It's not as good as a Pop-Tart," he shrugged. Kat sighed and snatched the spoon, rinsing it off before using it. Nex watched her curiously, shaking his head. "Really? What's wrong? Afraid I have cooties?" he asked, feigning offense. "Stop talking," Kat said, holding her hand up. The kettle started whistling and she left the spoon in her mouth while she dropped a tea bag in the mug before pouring the hot water. "Wouldn't a microwave be faster?" he asked, nodding to the microwave. "Stop analyzing my habits," Cat snapped, eating her yogurt angrily. Nex whistled, crossing his arms over his still exposed chest. Someone's grumpy today. What's wrong, kitten? Wasn't it nice to not wake up all alone? Or is the reason you're upset because I didn't do anything to ease your tension? If that's the case, head back to bed, open up those pretty legs and I'll eat you for breakfast. The comment had her frozen and flushing deeply, a strange sensation zapping through her. Cat took a deep breath, deciding to not indulge him with another word. She finished her yogurt and sipped on her tea, ignoring his non-stop comments. Once she was all done, she washed her spoon and mug and went for the door. She was outside, walking down the street when he came up alongside her, dressed like a normal person again. 12. Where are we going today? Nex asked. I suggest somewhere downtown where the drug addicts run rampant. How about a drug dealer that sells to children? Surely even you can't find something wrong with killing someone like that. Cat didn't answer, just kept walking, keeping her gaze ahead. Nex continued listing off potential people to kill but Cat tuned him out. She turned down another street and Nex grabbed her elbow, stopping her and making her face him as he glared down at her. This is fucking ridiculous. Don't make me take this too far, he said, running his finger down her cheek. Because I don't want to but I will, kitten, he said, pulling her against him, making her gasp. If you force me to, I will take it too far if it means getting my freedom back. His hand slid up her dress, along her thigh. She inhaled sharply, freezing in place. His nose skimmed along her neck and she couldn't understand why but it left tingles behind. His hand went higher, up her leg, fingers pressing into her and holding her in place. A name, kitten, he murmured. Or you'll be begging me to fuck you and after I'm gone, you'll hate yourself for letting me take you after saving yourself so long. You're unbelievable, Cat snapped, pushing him away and backing up. What is wrong with you? How could you threaten me with something like that? You're disgusting, she spat, wrapping her arms around herself and heading to the building. Nex sighed and muttered several curses before following after her. I'm sorry, kitten. Can't you understand I'm desperate to get home? Can't you understand He stopped abruptly and stumbled back. Cat paused and glanced back, frowning in confusion. Nex frowned for a moment before looking up, his eyes widening in realization. You've got to be fucking kidding me, he growled, glaring at the building in front of them. You're going to church? Yes, Cat said, crossing her arms. So? Are you doing this to fucking spite me or is this legitimately who you are? He asked, gesturing to the church. You're really self-centered, you know that. Cat sighed. Of course I'm not doing it to spite you. I come here every week. But church is so. He wrinkled up his nose and cursed. You can't actually believe the shit they teach in there. You're annoying but you're not stupid. I summoned a demon, Nex, Cat said, crossing her arms. I feel like I need to go now more than ever. I'm not going to hurt you. We've already established I'm incapable. Just come on, let's work something out, he said, inclining his head to the street. You just threatened me for the second time, Cat pointed out, raising an eyebrow. It wasn't a legitimate threat, for fuck's sake, Nex growled, running his hand through his hair. I have no powers to use on you. My powers won't work on you as long as we are bonded in this way. I can't force you to do anything. It was still very mean of you to say, Cat said, narrowing her eyes. You're trying to hurt me with your words since you can't with your actions, you really think that's better? Nex's expression strained and he paced back and forth. Come on, kitten. Let's talk this out. Let's get something real to eat, he said, gesturing for her to follow. If you're actually going to be nice, you can talk to me after church while I'm at work, Cat said, turning and heading to the church. She expected him to follow but he didn't. She looked back and he was in the same place. Catherine, come on, please. Nex said, holding his arms out in surrender. He seemed surprisingly vulnerable. Kat watched curiously as he paced back and forth but never came closer. She tilted her head to the side and looked up at the church, then back at him. He was standing just outside the edge of the church's property line. She stifled a laugh, covering her mouth. "Oh my God, you can't come in, can you?" she guessed. Nex growled, balling his fists. "Catherine, come on. Don't do this. Just come get something to eat with me and we can talk it out. I promise I'll behave." "Come get me and I will," Kat said, setting her hands on her hips. She briefly wondered if in any other instance, his looks could kill. He just stood there fuming, nostrils flaring. Watching him just made her laugh more. "Well, good to know I have some way to escape you," Kat said, turning and heading to the church's entrance. "Catherine," Nex growled. "Get back here. Right now." She ignored him and kept walking. "God damn it, Catherine. Get your ass over here," he snapped. "Language, Nex," Kat said, turning back to face him, setting her hand on her chest dramatically. "We're about to go into church, it's very disrespectful," she said, shaking her head. "Oh wait," she giggled. "Only I'm going into church, you can't," she shrugged. "Have a blessed Sunday." She waved before turning and walking in the double doors, leaving Nex standing outside sending curses up at the heavens.